Good morning, everyone. Pastor George here with our episode of A New Thing. And great stuff that we have planned today, obviously, as is always the case, right? So today we're going to dive back into a topic of mine that I really care about, as many of you who've probably watched this channel know, that I really care a lot about religious liberty in the United States, which if you know anything about me, right, as this being a church and me being a pastor, you might know that that's a pretty big deal for us in the churches. So I'm just pulling up our Bible verse really quick. I thought I pulled it up already, but my computer's kind of been on the fritz here, so I'm just pulling it up. We're going to look at Ephesians 4. Just a small section of it, because this really sums up kind of what's going on and how we can be a little bit smarter here. So I'm going to pull this up for us. So this is Ephesians 4. Here's the internet. There we go. And we're just going to look at verses 25 through 28. So Paul's writing to the Ephesians. Ephesus was a very religious city at the time, center of major cults of various gods. If you want to know more about that, I probably talk about it in our Ephesians Bible study videos on here, so I would check those out if you want more on that. But just know, lots of deities, polytheistic society, and Paul is giving instructions to Christians who are living in this city. So this is what he says. He says, "Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands. They may have something to share with those in need." Actually, 29 also is important. "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." It goes on to talk about how it's important. Now, this is mostly, just to let you know, instructions on how to deal with things that are going on inside the church, right? Which is why it's really important for Paul here that when he says neighbors here, of course we know the neighbors has a broad definition, but he's speaking in this case, right? Speak truthfully to your neighbor, for you're all members of one body. He has it in when he says it in that case, he's talking about the church. But this also has implications for things outside of society. All right, so why is that important? Well, because of this. Maybe some of you saw this. I don't know. Iowa lawmakers call for Governor Kim Reynolds to remove Satanic Temple's display from the Capitol. So, if you did not know, now you will, that this thing right here, this abomination, whatever you want to call it, was put up by the Satanic Temple in the Iowa Capitol House in Des Moines, Iowa, obviously, and it's ignited a firestorm. Now, we're going to talk about the Satanic Temple a little bit, why they did this, and the reason that, and how what they wanted to happen is exactly happened, and the way that some Christians have reacted to this have been very bad. And kind of what maybe it's a better way of reacting to this, right? So they set up this temple, or not this temple, but this statue of this goat-headed figure, right? Supposedly supposed to be Satan with the pentagram and all that other type of stuff. Now this is done for a purpose, which we're going to talk about, but ostensibly because it's a religious display. Now, in the United States, many of you probably are aware that during the holidays, we do have displays that are put up. I'm sure many of you are, over the past week or two, have seen the menorahs come up. I know I've seen a few in different parts of New Jersey, driving past, seeing menorahs lit up. Of course, Christmas trees and nativity scenes being displayed on public property as well. These are all, as long as they are not offensive are allowed to be on public ground as long as the state themselves is not the one setting it up. So every year, different religious groups will apply. And different towns have different regulations on this, by the way. So it's not like a right that you get to set this up. But places that allow displays usually will allow any group to register and put up a religious display if they want it. This also happens with like flags and things like that. So the Satanic Temple of Iowa decided to ask the Iowa government to put up this statue of Satan in the Capitol around Christmas time. And of course, this is done for a reason. But first, before I get to that reason, I just want to talk about how people have reacted. Now, of course, people have reacted very strongly about this. And here you can see that in the Des Moines Register that there's basically different groups of representatives there that are calling for different things to be done. Now, of course, Iowa, for anyone who doesn't know, is a very right-wing state, very conservative state. So most of the people in the representative state house are Republicans, and they're really the ones who are having this debate. I'm not sure what the Democrats in the Des Moines legislature are doing here. And so you have someone, right, this guy named Representative Brad Sherman, who is calling for the statue to be removed because it violates the Iowa Constitution. And then he quotes the Iowa Constitution because it talks about how it references God. It endorses God because in the beginning of the Iowa Constitution, like many constitutions, it says, we the people of such and such a place acknowledge the fact that God has given us these rights. And so he's saying, well, we set up this statue that explicitly attacks that. Now, I'm going to just throw my hat in the ring. I don't think that that's a good argument. Even as a pastor, even as someone who thinks that Satanic Temple is a joke, thinks that Satan is a joke, like as a figure to oppose God, he can't. He's weak. Jesus Christ crushes him under his feet. I'm not worried about Satan, and I'm not worried about the Satanic Temple. But what I am worried about is them doing exactly what the Satanic Temple wants them to do, which is try and get this statue removed or to remove it. And that would lead to a cascading of legal things that would then remove a lot of religion from government where it is currently. And that's the goal of the Satanic Temple when they do this type of stuff, right? And so you can even tell that this is kind of what they're doing. We're going to take a look at their Facebook page, but one person is trying to get it banned, right? And you can tell that like this is a political statement because the Huffington Post, which is a very left-wing news article, you can tell by the way that they phrase this, right? Satanic Temple altar at the Iowa State Capitol has Republicans seething. And that's, you can tell the glee that they have when they write something like this, right? I'll give it to you. This is all what politics is about, right? Just jumping on the other side. Outcry emerged after the unchristian-like altar was erected on the first floor of the Iowa State Capitol earlier this month, prompting the public and lawmakers to call for its removal. It's goat-headed idol Baphomet, a pagan deity who is invoked in various occult practices. So it's not Satan, it's Baphomet. It doesn't matter. It's some demonic figure, right? Ram skull, and then they talk about, this is the Huffington Post, right? Talk about how all these different things, people, different reactions to it. Lucian Graves, spokesman and co-founder of the Satanic Temple, told the Des Moines Register the piece was not intended to offend Christians, but was created to give other religions a more representation in public forums. People assume that they're there to insult Christianity, and we're not, Graves said, arguing, it's certainly a greater evil to allow the government to pick and choose between forms of religious expression. Now, two things can be true at once. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, even though some people will tell you you can't, right? I rarely try to read people's hearts. Lucien Graves is lying. And I don't mean this as like a disparagement on his character or whatever. I know he's lying because this is the Satanic Temple's whole deal. They do want to offend you. That's the point. They want to offend you in order so that people do something stupid, and then it leads to legislation that actually removes the ability for anyone to put up religious displays. Now, you might say, well, Pastor George, how do you know that type of thing? Right? Well, this is how I know. So this is the Satanic Temple in Iowa's Facebook page, right? They don't really do anything. They're anything important, right? And this is their statement, right, about their thing. They say the Satanic Temple of Iowa is proud to participate in the festivities at our capital this holiday season. Our display features the 7 tenets, a set of 7 core beliefs that members see as their guideposts for our deeply held beliefs, advocating bodily autonomy, rejection of arbitrary authority, recognizing our own fallibility, and inspiring nobility in thought and action, which we hope enlightens the viewer to our beliefs and inspires one to reflect upon their own approach to the world. And then they thank the staff at the Capitol and things like that. Holding fast to the principle of religious freedom, ensuring all religions have an equal opportunity to celebrate the holidays together in our beautiful capital. Now, of course, right, like that is so tinged with irony and sarcasm. It almost bleeds through the page, right? Is this actually supposed to be something that is supposed to show how they're celebrating the season? Like, why is this season important to the Satanic Temple? It isn't, right? Hasn't have anything to do with what they believe or anything like that. And this is the Satanic Temple. This is their Wikipedia page, right? You'll see here, right? The Satanic Temple is a non-theistic. That means they don't have a god, right? It's an atheistic. Like, it doesn't center around the worship of anyone in particular. And the whole point of the organization, right, is it's really a political one to promote civil rights, egalitarianism, religious skepticism, social justice, secularism, and the separation of church and state. And has utilized religious satire, theatrical ploys, humor, and legal action in their public campaigns to generate attention and prompt people to reevaluate fears and perceptions, and to highlight religious hypocrisy and encroachment on religious freedom, right? They don't believe in the supernatural Satan. They see him as a literary figure, all these other types of things, right? They want to break Christian privilege as far as it interferes with religious freedom and stuff like that, right? They were actually just granted tax-exempt status in 2019, interestingly enough. They weren't tax-exempt before that, right? So they're not a religious organization, I think, in any sort of real way. And everything they do is done to annoy people. Right? That's what they do. I would be happy to talk with a Satanist about this. I really think that it's meant to shock people into their political arrangement, right? And it's working. It's absolutely working here, right? This is they've tried to do stuff like this before, because there was a 10 Commandments. They talk about it here, right? 10 Commandments on the Oklahoma State Capitol. And so they tried to get an 8-foot tall Baphomet statue put there. And basically this led to the biblical monument being removed. You see how this works, right? It's a stunt that they do. So, like, this is what they're doing, right? The other groups show up. They in this article, they talk about how people show up and put up nativity scenes in the Iowa State Capitol. The whole point is to offend people enough that they either destroy it, which would be stupid, or try and get it removed through bad legislation, which then leads to all other religious displays getting removed, right? So, like, that's their goal. That's what they want to do here. And you need to understand this, because a lot of people shoot from the hip and they go, I saw a bunch of keyboard crusaders on Twitter being like, people need to go and destroy it. Why would we ever tolerate such a thing like this, right? You can tell that we're not a Christian country, blah, 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 blah. Right? A bunch of people who never will do anything anyway, talking big behind their laptops, like it always happens anyway, right? So this guy got dragged on Twitter, but he's one of the representatives at the Iowa State House, and he's absolutely correct. He's a pastor. I think he's like kind of like one of those guys who's politician first or does something else, and he's at a Baptist church where they kind of ordain everyone as pastor. But that doesn't, maybe not. Maybe I haven't done a lot of research on him, but that's kind of the vibe I've gotten. Doesn't mean he's wrong though. So this is what he says in his statement here. He says, as many of you have become aware, last week a display was erected at the Iowa Capitol by the Satanic Temple of Iowa. As I have responded to concerns from Iowans about the display, I wanted to share with you how this display came to be in my response. So he talks firstly about the way that this happens, right? That you are required to show that you're independent, you're not propped up by the state, right? Iowa isn't paying for this thing to be up there. They're up there for 2 weeks. They petitioned in August. Originally, it was rejected because they wanted a real goat skull, so they had to get rid of that. And so then they put up a new one, and it's either the operating procedure is either to allow all displays or none. And if they can think up new rules, then they can change it if necessary. Now, this is what he says. He says, my response as a follower of Christ is I certainly find a display from the Satanic Temple objectionable. It stands in direct opposition to my faith and would be classified as evil. I agree. Not a new experience for me and my family. The Word of God continually warns us about dangers in our world. In fairness, many other religions or non-religious people have the same perspective about Christianity, which is true, right? Like the Satanic Temple does not view Christianity as a positive thing. It does not want it to be in the public square, right? Lots of people view Christianity as evil. So we have to remember that. My observation as an Iowan and state representative is I don't want the state evaluating and making determinations about religions. I'm guided by the First Amendment of the Constitution. So yes, that is exactly the stance that Christians in the United States should have when this sort of thing happens, because the way that religious freedom works is if it's taken from one people, it might not happen immediately, but it can easily be taken from you. I mean, just this day, right, there was a poll on Twitter, which of course, it goes on, and it was about whether or not churches should be tax exempt. And the vast majority of people voted no, they shouldn't, right? That churches should be taxed. Now, of course, that's just people shooting from the hip from what they feel because they don't really understand anything, because they don't like religion, because of all these things. But you can see that in a culture that is changing, that we can't just assume that we are going to have any sort of privileged position in this, right? And so if we give ground to, only some forms of religious display are tolerable. And what I mean by that is non-offensive. I do think that if you wanted to get rid of this display, basically we'd have to say is it can't be attacking anyone in particular. And I would say setting up a Satan statue at Christmas time is meant to attack and to provoke, right? If it was done in July, no one would care, right? It was clearly done for this purpose at this time. And so, I think that this is a pretty obvious way that maybe you could change the law that would still fundamentally hold religious liberty together. But at the same time, right, it wouldn't be banning a certain group from doing it. You would just say you can't do this in order to make people upset type of thing, right? And then he talks about how he responds as a Christian, and I thought that this was good, right? That, we should be praying, we should be understanding that we still have work to do, we should, a difference between the person of Christ and that of Satan, which is good. Like, if I cared more about talking about the Satanic Temple, I'd point out kind of the ridiculousness of their beliefs, right? That they, for some reason, are all about, They're, again, actually really a heresy of Christianity. They're all for all of our ethics, but not what underpins it, which is ridiculous. That our faith shouldn't be imposed on other people, things like that, right? And I agree that government is a poor arbitrator of religion, at least in our context, and honestly in a lot of contexts. Then he says, we're going to review the guidelines. We're going to monitor the number of organizations requesting displays because you don't want to have a ton of them, and find a way to limit it and continue to dialogue, right? That's basically all you can do. But of course, and this is why I chose Ephesians 4, because Ephesians 4 applies so well to this, to what's going on. Because one, right, you speak truthfully to your neighbor. You tell them things that are wrong, tell them things that are correct. If they do stuff that's bad, right, in this case, in terms of the polity that's going on inside, you can be angry about that. But as Paul says, in your anger, do not sin, right? That you can be angry about these things, but don't do something stupid. Don't use your anger as a cover to do bad things, right? Like march into a state house and destroy this thing. That would be a very stupid way to take this out. And then, that you're supposed to do something useful here with your time. Here he's talking about theft, right? But honestly, I would consider this also doing stuff online that's useful, because a lot of this is just people gloating and getting way too into the news online. And of course, speaking out of turn is also something that's been happening a lot, right? You don't see it on Facebook. Actually, a lot of people on Facebook have been very nice to this guy. On Twitter, though, Christians have been saying some really nasty things to him, calling him a false believer, saying he cares more about the United States than he does about God, that he's weak, and other Christians like this are weak, and they should go and destroy this thing. And then I just checked his Facebook, and he's ringing bells for the Salvation Army. It's guys, this is not someone who does not take their faith seriously. There are lots of people in politics who absolutely fake being a Christian for votes all the time. This is not one of them. And just in general, you shouldn't be behind a keyboard telling other people how to do that unless you actually know the person. So it's just so sad to see that happening, and it gives Satan a foothold. Right? It's funny that all these ways that people think that they're going to be able to fight against this by destroying it or speaking ill of things, right, actually give Satan a foothold. Why? Because people are able to read, right? People read, and they see the way that people react. They see that we are not living the way that we should. And the reason we're supposed to act cautiously and carefully and not rashly is because it benefits those who listen. Like what Paul is saying. So this little temple altar thing is gross, but I think we need to remember that the way that, and honestly, it doesn't offend me in any serious way. I don't care. I grew up in the Northeast. It doesn't bother me to see other religions around. I think that's the future in some parts of the American states, where we're going to have to get used to this. And obviously, you just need to have a tough skin like the early Christians did, where they actually saw way worse stuff than we did, and they didn't go around destroying temples. It's a slow battle for people's souls. It requires love and patience, and those are the things that we are always in chronically short supply in. So just let this be a reminder this holiday season, right, that when things like this happen, when we are called to love our neighbor and kind of do things, we all want instant solutions, and we think that maybe by just using the sword or something like that, it would be the quickest way, but that always comes to bite us in the butt. It just does. I can see tons of times in Christian history where we've traded, Christ for temporal power, and even if it's helped in the short term, it's really devastated the church, I think, in the long run in a lot of ways. So just, be mindful of that, and always build people up. If you're going to disagree in a way that is appropriate, and do not become sinfully angry in the way that you respond to things. Be measured. Understand that there's a way to defeat these powers without having to be rash. So, yeah. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Looking forward to it. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Peace out.